one of the things I've been talking about a fair amount recently is stuff to do with poetics. I'm still kind of wrestling with the term, really. I don't feel as if I understand it enough to. I don't feel as if I understand it enough to really say anything terribly profound about it, or even to maintain coherence yet. So I'm trying to keep working through it until I can, think with it really, rather than just think about it. At the moment, I'm kind of understanding poetics in a really broad sense, kind of as the processes by which, the data of the world, if you like, turns into the stuff of thought. And I know that's really broad. The data of the world turns into the stuff of thought. And probably the best book I've read about that, in addition to a lot of the stuff on cognitive linguistics, would be a book by Raymond Gibbs called Poetics of Mind, where he identifies, four of the key terms that are associated with literary poetics: metaphor, metonymy, synecdoche, and irony, and relates those to cognitive processes, and basically makes the claim that the mechanisms of our cognition are, broadly speaking, those same four processes that we find in conventional literary poetics: metaphor, metonymy, synecdoche, and irony. And then a whole host of things follow from that. And certainly the idea of some of those, metaphor and metonymy particularly, are explored in Mark Turner's work. I'm thinking about Literary Mind, in Lakoff and Johnson's work, in Leonard Talmey's work, and a whole host of work related to conceptual metaphor, cognitive linguistics, cognitive poetics, more broadly. One of the things I'm just thinking about is that the focus of Raymond Gibbs' work on the writers that I've just spoken about is on what happens to data once it kind of gets into your brain. I'm simplifying from effect, from my own understanding really, but broadly speaking, those writings are about what kind of cognitive processes, ultimately neurological processes, are at work on the data that's coming in through our sensory mode, through our sensory modalities, our ability to see and hear and touch and taste and so on. What happens to that, to turn it into experience, or to turn it into, as I said, the stuff of thought, or as Steven Pinker says, the stuff of thought actually. Where I'm just thinking about that right now is, to what extent that poetics is actually in operation before it gets anywhere near the grey stuff of the brain, really, and whether kind of sense itself, sensation, sensory engagement, is in itself a kind of poetics, an embodied poetics, if you like. So here what I'm thinking is, here I am in Cheshire again, near this rather nice old railway bridge. It's called the Dancing Bridge, this bridge, because apparently a few decades ago, when there was a railway line running across the top, people used to have dances down here. It's still a gathering place for teenagers on a nice day. Baby guy, come on! Now they collect the evenings and drink lager. And I always have to be careful because they tend to break the glasses, the bottles, and my dogs cut their paws sometimes. Come on, pups! Come on! Anyway, we're going up the steps above the dancing bridge and I have to avoid this other dog. Come on! So what am I going about this? Oh yeah, so anyway, so here I am in Cheshire, near the dancing bridge, near the old railway line, surrounded by trees and dogs and all those kind of things. And all my senses are working to the extent that they do work, but the extent that they work is limited. I can only directly access, for example, a small slice of the electromagnetic spectrum that we call visible light. I can only hear a small range of the various possible auditory signals that could be available, and so on. So there's a sense, I think, in which, if not a poetic process, but at least an editing process, is being kind of forced upon me, or it's just part of the nature of my being, really. a lot of the data of the world is being culled, is being edited out before it gets anywhere near the processing centres of my brain. And also what that, to the extent that I am receiving information, the data that I am receiving, that's also kind of pre-organised in a way. There's also a kind of poetic organisation of that data, which again precedes its processing by cognitive means. I am located at one particular point in space with two eyes at the front of my head, so all the data that I have is constrained to a viewpoint, a relatively narrow viewpoint. I can only see one side of these trees at once, although they have a back, but I can't see the back. There is the kind of logic of perspective, which makes things diminish as they move away, and that's a transformation of the data. The data is affected by the nature of my embodiment and by the nature of its embedding within a particular kind of environment. And again, I think I would say those are poetic processes. So in addition to those ones that I've talked about that you find in Raymond Gibbs, the metaphor, metonymy, synecdoche and irony, and perhaps other kind of figurations of speech and thought and data and sense, in addition to those, I think there are also what you might call poetic transformations, poetic processes that are forced upon the data of the world by being a particular kind of embodied being with particular kinds of sensory access to that data.